Welcome to Chaos in the Class. Today we're going to continue our reading on the Iliad. Now at this point, we're down to the duel. So boys and girls, open your books to page 41 and let's look and see about the duel. We just ended with a really good part that the duel was about to happen. Okay, everybody ready? Are you excited about today? I'm so excited to find out what happens. Even the sea breeze died. So everyone's like, wonder what's going to happen. Even the sea breeze died. Nothing moved. The armies were still. Paris wore greaves to protect his legs and a bronze breastplate. His sword had a silver-studded handle, and his shield a bronze boss in the center. His gilded helmet had a bright red horsehair crest. Carefully, he chose a spear weighted and balanced for his hand. So he was dressed and ready for this duel. Menelaus, who loved to wage battle, stood at his mark. The troop sat spellbound as the two men squared up to one another. The signal was given, and the battle began. Paris hurled his long shadowed spear. It fell, deflected by Menelaus's shield, or perhaps by one of the interfering gods. Now remember, are the gods up there really interfering with this battle? No. Okay, so are they really interfering? No. So that's the belief of, well, did Menelaus's shield really protect him, or did the gods interfere? Menelaus balanced his spear, praying to mighty Zeus to be revenged for the unkind way Paris had treated him. He hurled his spear with such force it pierced Paris's shield, tore through his armor, and even ripped the tunic underneath. It drew blood from Paris's thigh. Menelaus followed the hurtling spear into a close attack with his silver-mounted sword. He swung hard against the ridge of Paris's helmet. The sword shattered from the power of the blow and left Menelaus at the mercy of the Trojan opponent. The soldiers roared, both fighters on. Fast as thought, Menelaus flung himself onto the younger man and grasped the high-maned helmet by the rim. The bronze helmet was held in place by the chin strap. Menelaus pulled harder and harder on the helmet. He began to swing his opponent, who was choking as the strap cut deeper and deeper into his throat. Menelaus edged back, pulling Paris, who was gasping to drag in air. Menelaus leaned back against the weight of the younger man and twisted his helmet. Paris lost his footing. Mighty Menelaus started to spin as if he was throwing a discus, still holding the helmet by its rim. Okay, this is not looking good, is it? Looks like someone is fixing to really go down. Menelaus edged back, pulling Paris, who was gasping to drag in air. Oh, I just read that. Menelaus leaned back with all of his weight of the younger man and twisted his helmet. Paris lost his footing. Mighty Menelaus started to spin as if he was throwing a discus, still holding the helmet by its rim. Had it not been for Aphrodite's speed, Paris would surely have been strangled to death. The goddess snapped the leather, and the helmet came free. Menelaus threw it into the Greek lines, picked up his bronze spear, and lunged at Paris once again. But Aphrodite's favorite vanished into the dust. Wow. Raised by the struggle, some say the goddess conjured up a mist from the sea to protect Paris. The fact is that he hurried back through the Trojan lines and in the city gates to his home. Helen turned away, now afraid of her fate. King Agamemnon proclaimed that the Greek hero had won. The oaths we made before you all, and the sacrifices to the gods that sanctified those oaths say that Helen and all of her wealth must be given back to us." The men cheered his words. The high king had spoken. The battle begins. The gods looked out over the armies gathered in front of Troy. Zeus wondered aloud, "Do we let the Trojans hand Helen back and be done with the battle, or do we stir it up again?" Hera was furious. "I won't agree to let them hand Helen over. I won't let it be so settled so feebly. Paris and the Trojans would get off too lightly. I want war." Her demand angered Zeus. "How dare you, Hera, to hate these mortals so much you'd condemn them to suffer more? Is 10 years not enough? Friends of yours will die if the war goes on. I shall see to it." Thunder roared around Mount Olympus, and lightning slashed the evening sky as Athene sent word to Pandarus, the Trojan archer, that mighty Menelaus must die by his hand. Paris and all of Troy would favor him if he broke the truce and killed the Greek hero. Pandarus bent his bow of curling ibex horn to string it. Then, hidden behind the shields of his friends, he watched Menelaus scanning the Trojan ranks for Paris. Despite the truce agreed between the leaders of the armies, he knocked his arrow. That means that he put his arrow into the bow and the string. He knocked his arrow, prayed to the archer god, Apollo, bent the bow in a stiff arc, and fired the humming arrow. It flew straight at Menelaus, and if not for a deflection by Athene, would have killed the hero. She guided the arrow to the gold buckles of his belt. It pierced his decorated cuirass and leather shirt, and then the flesh of his arm. He fell to his knees from the pain, but he did not die. Agamemnon, seeing his brother wounded, called off the truce. He ordered the Greeks to find the truce breaker and kill him. And the Trojans, realizing the angry Greeks would strike hard and fast, came on. Again, bloody war would rage. Agamemnon spurred on his commanders, liars, and truce breakers will be left for carrion dogs and vultures to tear at. So carrion, in science terms, is like roadkill, something that's been run over on the road and some vulture will come and eat it. So it said liars and truce breakers will be left for carrion dogs and vultures to tear at. We'll take their wives and children as house slaves when Troy is burning. The Greeks cheered, and Idomeneus, with the Cretan leader, spoke. "They'll drink death and the dishonor. We Cretans swear to it." He saluted the high king. His men unsheathed their swords, so they took them out of their holders, checked the arrows in their quivers, and stood ready for the coming battle. Nestor told his men he regretted he was not young, but promised not to abandon them and to command from his squadron of chariots. Agamemnon rode on. He found Odysseus and his men waiting behind the front ranks. "Are you afraid of what's coming?" Agamemnon mocked. Odysseus brusquely told his chief, "You will see our courage when we engage with the Trojans." Steadily the Trojan army advanced, chariot wheels rumbling, horse harnesses clattering, drum thundering, and overall a cloud of dust. Beyond the battlefield, flocks of long-necked vultures and packs of pariah dogs waited for their feast. Men were going to die. Helen watched anxiously from the city walls as the warriors surged forward like twin tides about to swallow each other up. The Greek armies faced the Trojans, their horsehair plumes proudly upright, the relentless sun glinting on metal spears, embossings, and blades. A shower of death-dealing spears glittered and hissed across the narrowing space. Men cried out in pain to their gods, their wives, and their sons and daughters as they closed their eyes on the world. So you'll notice that right here we've got people that are injured and maybe are not going to make it. The author did not just insert and just go, they killed the guy. They are very detailed in what they're saying. They're painting a picture. A shower of death-dealing spears glittered and hissed across the narrowing space, is what the author says. Men cried out in pain to their gods, their wives, and their sons and daughters as they closed their eyes on the world. The Trojans advanced, stabbing spearheads, crushed skulls, and emerged through breastbones, throats, and backs. Eyes were sliced by backhand blows of bronze blades, hurled stones, broke noses, shoulders, hip bones. And so it continued in ever-mounting chaos. Echepolus, a Trojan.
Pardon this interruption. If you are going to attend the attendance party,
well,
please make your way quietly
there you
to the
go.
cafeteria
It's
for the
obviously a
attendance party.
class if you don't have an announcement in the middle of it. Here we go. Echepolus, a Trojan, was the first to die, killed despite his full armor. Darkness came down on his eyes as he fell into the general melee. So that's like a big frenzy going on. A friend tried to drag his body away so that it could be taken behind the lines for a decent burial. The killer wanted to strip the body of its armor. So, like, basically take a little war medal, hey, look what I got. All around them, swords, stabbing, spears, and shield edges crushed and cut and killed. Ajax struck at the Athamenon's, I'm not sure how to say his name, Athamenon's son, who ended his brief life speared like a pig through breast and shoulder. A friend attempted to avenge the boy but missed Ajax and speared a friend of Odysseus through the groin. Odysseus, roaring with battle rage, struck and struck again. With the same fury, Diomedes was relentlessly killing somewhere else in the battle. Apollo tried to rally the Trojans. These Greeks are only flesh and blood. They don't even have their hero Achilles with them. He's sulking like a woman by the ships. He'll be combing his golden hair. So we see the battle going on. The illustrator is doing a really good job of illustrating what it looks like. So some are on chariots. We've got the battle going on. We've got their shields and their swords and their spears and arrows are flying. It's just chaos. The Trojans laughed and rallied, but the young Greek Diomedes was determined to win glory. It's not looking good, okay? So we got a little bit of foreshadowing going on with the author saying, there might be something else coming. The Trojans laughed and rallied, but the young Greek Diomedes was determined to win glory. Athene came to give a hand to help balance Apollo's anger. Diomedes used both spear and sword to deadly effect. Phegeus, the Trojan, tried to kill him with his spear, but missed. Diomedes fired and hit his target, tumbling Phegeus from his chariot. Diomedes captured the horses and told his men to take them away from the roaring battlefield. Agamemnon hurled his spear after the Trojan Augeas. It hit him in the back, and he fell with a thud under the wheels of his chariot. At the same moment, Idomeneus saw Fastius in his chariot. I just lost my place. Where am I? There it is. So at the same moment, Idomeneus saw Fastius in his chariot. With a mighty arm, the Cretan flung his death-dealing spear and struck Fastius under the right shoulder. He crashed the Trojan to the ground. The Cretan's servants stripped the corpse and left it for the dogs. A mighty chariot raced out of control around the battlefield, its horses driven mad by the smell of blood and the ceaseless roar of battle. The driver lay across the chariot, his bleeding body pinned to the wood by his spear. The leading horse screamed. An arrow fired by Paris had pierced its skull right above the eye. In the thick of the fighting, the blood-crazed, battle-crazed, unsatiated men fought on, killing like machines, unable to stop. Okay, the battle goes on. Diomedes, inspired by the goddess Athene, found the glory he was looking for. He seemed to glow with the fire of battle as he tore into the heart of the fight. All over the battlefield, he dealt out death and destruction, taking armor and horses for the Greeks. Men died on the hissing point of his spear, under the terrible chop of his bronze sword blade, or crushed under the wheels of his chariot. He cut out a line of death just as a winter gale cuts down trees. Pandarus, the Trojan truce-breaker, saw him and swore to take him out of the battle. He aimed his bow and hit the edge of Diomedes' breastplate as he pushed into the fray. Pandarus saw that his sword had wounded Diomedes and yelled in triumph, "Come on, Trojans, forward! Forward, charioteers! Their best man is badly wounded. I, Pandarus, have done it. He won't last long now." Diomedes held the arrow stuck in his shoulder and called out to his charioteer. Ooh, what did he say? "Quick, pull this arrow out. Hurry. Cut it out if you have to." No sooner said than done. Diomedes, healed by a prayer to Athene, roared back into the battle like the bravest of lions. In the melee of men and swords and horses and flying spears, he found his enemy. Pandarus threw first and missed. Diomedes cast his hissing spear and hit the Trojan archer on the nose beside his eye. The spear passed through his teeth, cut off his tongue, and came out under his chin. His burnished armor crashed as he fell from his chariot. His friend Aeneas stood over the body to protect it from being stripped of armor. Diomedes flung a huge rock at the spear, carrying Aeneas, and crushed his thigh. The world went black for Aeneas, and he would have died if Aphrodite hadn't rescued him. The Trojans needed a hero as brave as the bravest Greek. The Greeks were threatening to break through the huge gates into Troy itself. The god Ares, disguised as Acamas, a hot-blooded ally of the Trojans, demanded to know where the royal princes of the city were hiding. "Are you going to let these Greeks walk into your city? Are you going to leave your dead and dying to be desecrated by pariah dogs and carrion birds? We need Hector to take on the battle, if he has the courage." Ares, using the voice of Acamas, called around the battlefield and mocked the Trojan chief. Others joined in the mockery. "Come on, Hector, stop using your silver tongue. You'll tell us next you can hold the gates of Troy? Just you and your brothers and sisters? We don't see one of them here. Are your allies who came over here over land and sea to be abandoned in the battle while you and yours spend your time behind the walls of the city? The shouts were angry now. You leave us to face these Greeks alone. Get out here and fight. There was little time left then before the Trojans' allies would desert and leave the battlefield to the Greeks. Ooh, you don't want to lose your allies. Hector. Hector hurtled into the field in full battle armor, his chariot and ivory handles on the reins and bronze rails. The reins were made of oxhide, strong enough to curb even the wildest horses. With his long spear in his left hand, he surged through the men fighting hand to hand just as they were about to retreat. Stay, he called. You won't fight for nothing. Be real men, not cowards. Don't retreat another step. The Trojans' forces saw great Hector and his dancing horses searing a path through the Greeks with sword and spear. Hector stopped the Greek advance almost single-handedly. So you see the picture of him. He looks pretty mighty, a very mighty, fierce warrior, and even his horse is depicted as somebody that's a very regal horse. All around the battlefield, warriors took the armor from the men they had killed, their loot to keep or sell. When Ajax killed a mighty Trojan, he ran to strip the armor off of him, but was kept off by a shower of arrows and swarms of glittering javelins. Ajax quickly planted his foot on the dead man's chest, dragged out his own bronze spear, and retreated. Hector led the Trojans in a strong assault. Ajax speared the mighty Acamas, and night came down on his eyes. So think about what the author just said there. Or is he really talking about the evening sky? And night came down on his eyes. So, or is he talking about the guy blacked out from his wounds and injuries from battle? Diomedes killed the Trojan Axylus and his chariot driver, sending both to the world below. The battle surged back and forth, the armies fighting in close and bloody conflict. No breaks were offered or given. If men tried to surrender, they were cut down by merciless blades, even as they begged for mercy. Nestor called out, "No looting now. We are here to kill, so kill. Afterward, you may loot the corpse at your leisure." The Trojans made their stand near the walls of their city. Hector was urged to return to the city to ask his mother, Hecuba, and his wife, Andromache, to make a sacrifice to Athene. So they're asking the gods for some help here. I'll ask them to pray that Diomedes is never allowed to run amok in our broad streets, for no woman or child would be safe from his bloody sword, he promised. His men cheered. Hector leaped from his chariot, and as he worked his way back toward the gates, he urged his men on, knowing they needed only to see him to rouse their fighting spirit. He strode through the ranks of his men, crying out, "My friends, fight with the courage you have always shown. Cover me while I go into the city to make sure our women make a proper sacrifice to Athene and the gods of war." Hector hurried past the women, waiting by the gate for news of their husbands, sons, and lovers. Ignoring their desperate cries, he hurried into the city. When he reached his mother's house, she offered him wine to pour as an offering to the gods. Hector refused to make the libation. Now, libation is a drink, okay? Hector refused to make the libation be spattered as he was with blood and gore. "I cannot pray to Zeus. I am defiled with blood. You and the women must pray. Mother, promise Promise Athene a dozen yearlings, cloth, some lambs, whatever you value most, offer it. So he's making it really important. This is really, really, really important. He then turned to try to find his brother Paris. He shames us, mother, and is not worthy of the royal blood. If he was on his way to Hades, I would not stop him, nor do more than wish him good riddance. No doubt he lies in Helen's arms, but not for much longer, I promise you. Hector hurried through the empty streets, past the barricaded houses, to Priam's palace. Paris was polishing his shield until it reflected like a mirror. Paris looked up in fear as his brother burst in. Helen and her servant were appalled by the blood and filth that covered the mighty warrior from head to, toe. From head to toe. They backed away from his rage. Get out and fight, Hector ordered. I came here, said Paris, because I felt our warriors mocked me. They mock you for your vanity, staring into any mirror you pass. You shame us. They laugh at you for running from Menelaus. Put your armor on. Get outside the walls and run the risk we all run. In other words, get in the fight. I can't leave Helen, said Paris. Hector turned away then, but Helen begged him to listen to her. I know you think that I am shameless, and maybe I am, but I have been urging Paris to do his duty. Hector stared at the lovely woman, and she urged him to rest for a moment. Not as long as there is fighting to be done and men to lead, Hector replied. Turning back to Paris, I won't wait for you. Come with me to the fighting, or I will brand you a coward. Paris started in anger, but his brother had already left to seek out his wife, Andromache, and Scamandrius, his lovely son. He found Andromache by the Skyian gate, and they were waiting to embrace her battle-marked man. She had no fear that he would abandon the field. She knew Hector would, I don't know what that word is. Let me look. Something's on the screen. She knew Hector would die there and foretold it. So she had a bad feeling about it. When I lose you, dear husband, I too might as well be dead. When you sleep the dark sleep, I will have nothing left in my life. Andromache knew grief. Hadn't her father been killed by Achilles? But it has to be said, Achilles treated her father's body honorably. Achilles freed my mother, but she too is dead now. The noble Andromache looked up into Hector's face and smiled a little. You're my brother, father, mother, and beloved husband. Hector held her in his arms, and then holding her away from him, said, I'm not afraid of death, but of what will come to you if these Greeks take our city. I see you as a slave in their land, and whenever you pass carrying water, men will say, there goes Hector's wife. I will lie deep below the ground before I hear the screams you make when they carry you away. Hector leaned down gently and kissed his son. He and the child's mother saw that the boy was afraid of his bloody, battle-weary father. Holding the child, Hector prayed to Zeus, may people say when this child comes back from battle that he is a better man than his father. Hector hugged his child again and kissed his wife. He begged her not to weep and walked away after saying to her that he knew he would not die until fate said it was time. Go home now, Andromache, pray and attend to the loom, for that is your work. So a loom is one of those things that they do wool, and they kind of twist the wool in from shearing it from a sheep, and then they wind it back and forth to make blankets and clothes. It's a very arduous process. It's very lengthy. So he's telling her, go make yourself busy. The work you should be doing is making the clothes. We're going to go fight the battle. War is men's work. And war is above all the work of Trojans and of your husband. He replaced his helmet, and then he saw Paris hurrying to join him. Together the brothers passed through the high gates of Troy with one purpose, to drive the Greeks from Trojan soil. Champions meet. The gods looked down from Mount Olympus. Athene was anxious that the Trojan forces would wreak havoc among her favorites, who were led by Agamemnon. She hurried down to make some changes. Apollo, who favored the Trojans, raced to intercept her. They met close to the roaring battlefield, and in the din of the battle, these two schemers talked. I know what you want, Athene, said Apollo. You want nothing more to have Troy of the broad streets burned to ashes. Athene tried to interrupt, but Apollo went on. It's late afternoon. The sun will set soon. I will persuade Hector to challenge the Greeks to send a hero to fight him in a duel. Athene laughed at that. I hope for your sake he's braver than his brother. We'll see, said Apollo. Athene and Apollo sat in a huge oak tree, leaned their weapons against the highest branches, and waited. During a lull in the fighting, Hector stepped in front of the Trojan lines, holding back his own men with his shield and spear. Then he stepped into the no man's land between the armies to issue his challenge. It seems that Zeus from his high throne wants to watch us suffer until you bring down the towers of Troy, or until you are beaten back to the beaches and into your ships. I propose we stop this gory battle, and that I fight your champion man to man. Winner takes all. The Greeks sat in the dust to rest their bruised and bloodied bodies, as did the Trojans. Rank after rank of men, weapons ready by their sides, spears upright like the quills of the giant porcupine. Hector spoke as the two armies silently listened. With Zeus as my witness, if your man wins, he may strip my honor and take it. Strip my armor, take it. But he must leave my body so that my wife and the Trojans may burn it properly. If Apollo lets me win, I promise that your man may be buried and a mound raised to make a monument to a warrior killed in single combat by the heroic Hector. Choose a champion to fight at me. So, with Zeus as my witness, if your man wins, he may strip my armor and take it, but he must leave my body so that my wife and the Trojans may burn it properly. If Apollo lets me win, I promise that your man may be buried and a mound raised to make a monument to a warrior killed in a single combat by the heroic Hector. Choose a champion to fight me. So no one moved. Hector looked slowly along the lines of Greek soldiers, but none would meet the eye of this fearless man. Apollo looked at Athene and smirked. They watched from the top branches of the oak two bent-necked vultures waiting and waiting. Eventually there was a flurry of movement, and a man stood up. It was Menelaus, who cried to the men around him, You women of Greece, so he gave them an insult. You women of Greece, sit there and rot. I will fight Hector myself. So no one's stepping forward, so Menelaus is like, okay, I'll do it. Menelaus began to prepare his most glorious armor. though he knew he was as good as dead. Remember, Menelaus is a little bit wounded here. Hector was as much a greater fighter than he was. The Greeks needed mighty Achilles, but he sat in the shade by his ships and slept. Agamemnon hurried to his brother and begged Menelaus not to do it. Brother, even Achilles is afraid to meet Hector in single combat. Go and sit down. We will find someone and other to fight this man. Reluctantly, Menelaus gave in and sat apart from the other men, ashamed. Remember, whoever they put up to fight Hector had better win. It's win or take all here. Apollo shifted on his branch and lifted his long, scraggy neck to the bright sunlight. Athene sat and waited. Below them, Nestor, the old and wise, rose to his feet to speak. It is enough to make all of Greece weep. How the great heroes of our past would be ashamed as I am ashamed. If I were younger, I would stand. But words are easy, as you cowards know. So he's saying it's easy just to yell out and call names. You got to stand up and fight, is what he's saying. He continued angrily until 9 men could bear it no longer. Diomedes, Idomeneus, and his squire and 6 others claimed the right to fight. You will choose with stones, said Nestor. And each man made his mark on a stone and tossed it into Nestor's helmet. The stone that came to Nestor's hand when he took the burnished helmet was what they all had wished for. Ajax rejoiced. He turned and asked them to pray to Zeus for his victory. In the tree, Apollo watched eagerly. Athene was relieved that the Greeks had a man willing to fight with the mighty Hector. Ajax adjusted his flashing bronze armor. The bright metal buckled to his legs, and the burnished metal on his shoulder and down his back, carved and etched with images of wild animals and the goddess Athene. His sword blade was inlaid with gold and silver, his helmet topped with a curving mane of his horsehair dyed blood red. He took his spear and his 7-layered oxhide shield and stepped into no man's land. So I'm thinking here that if you think about a field, think about being out at recess, and think about one whole grade level over at like close to the building, and another whole grade level out close to maybe the fence. I think most schools have that, a fenced area, okay? So one grade level is opposing another grade level. One's at the school building and one's at the fence. And no man's land is somewhere out in the middle, okay? So I just want you to know, kind of paint a picture of what's going on here. So they advance into no man's land. Now, he said to Hector, you will see what type of men we Greeks are, even when the best of us, Achilles, the breaker of men, lies by his ships, you will see. So what did he just call Achilles? Sounds like he just called him a coward. You're laying by the ships. You're not here. Hector answered Ajax. So he's like throwing down a challenge. He's like getting him with his words right now, you know. Hector answered Ajax as a brave man would without boasting. I know, Prince Ajax, who you are, but you cannot frighten me with words. I am a fighter. Far away or close up, I am ready. But let me say, I see a man before me, so let's fight. With that, Hector flung his dark-shadowed javelin. It tore through 6 layers of Ajax's shield. The 7th held, look at that. Look at the picture. So you got the shield, okay? So the 7th held, what is it? Let's look. Oh, the 7th held. It tore through 6 layers of Ajax's shield. The 7th held. Ajax flung his javelin. It glanced off the shining embossing of Hector's shield, sliced through the leather tunic over his thigh, but missed his flesh as Hector swerved aside. Now they fell on each other like savage beasts. Ajax cut Hector's neck with a spear blow. Hector drew back a little, bent over, and in one movement picked up and hurled a jagged rock at Ajax. His shield rang out as the stone hit the embossing. Ajax quickly hurled a boulder that swept Hector off his feet and smashed his shield. So they're really going at it now. Apollo saw that his hero was about to be butchered by Ajax and raised his man to his feet. Athene was angry, but it was too late. Again, the two men fell on each other, this time with broad-bladed swords flashing in the evening light. Back and forth they fought, sometimes hidden in the clouds of whirling dust they raised. Often all the armies knew were the clashing sounds of bronze on bronze and of grunts as the two men slashed and parried, hit and thrust. The sun began to fall beyond the sea, and dark shadows stretched over the battleground. The shadows of long spears fell across the dust. Okay, y'all, this is not like they've got lights that can come on. When it gets dark, it gets dark. So this is really interesting as we've got a bunch of bystanders that are looking on to see who wins this battle. And remember, it's winner takes all. So it's not like they're going to just stop and go, okay, hey, let's cut that now, pause, walk away. Now we're going to come back tomorrow morning. What's good for you? You want to go at 8? We'll get back together and duke it out and find out who gets to win the city or leave. You know, it's not like that. So they are going to fight and fight and fight. So this is interesting that it's now getting really dark. So this is going to be really interesting how this works out. In a pause, as the champions dragged in breath to slow their pumping hearts, Hector said, Ajax, you are a worthy champion and a great spearman. I admit it. If I suggest we stop fighting today, we can meet again and go on until the gods decide which of us shall die. The light is fading. Maybe we should take the hint. Wow. I did not see that coming. Did y'all see that coming in this book? Wow. So Hector suggested that. Let's take a pause. Wow. All right, with blood smearing their arms, their necks, and their chests, the two men looked into each other's eyes and trusted what they saw. Ajax pushed his blunted sword into its sheath. Hector, to the surprise of his men, undid his sword belt and handed it with his silver-studded sword to his opponent. So he now doesn't have his weapon. He handed it over. Ajax took off his own splendid purple belt and handed it to Hector. The two men clasped hands and parted as friends. So they exchanged their weapons and took a pause. The sun fell over the rim of the world night. Wow, that was quite some trust there. All right, we will take up the chapter called Burials. Now, everybody stop and jot a prediction of what you think this next chapter coming up is going to be all about. Now, I'll tell you, burials to me, what comes to mind is somebody has passed away and we're going to go to a funeral. Is that what's going on? I'm not sure. So we will take a look at that tomorrow. This has been a read aloud from Chaos in the Class. My name is Brenda Fuller. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will be putting up more things all year long. Have a great day and enjoy reading.